So what's going on in the housing market? It is August 2026. Let's see what's cooking out there for our local housing market. New listing rose 2.4% year over year in January, closing out strongest spring since 2022. Jake Krimmel, senior economist, Realtor.com. So that's nationally what we're seeing. This year, when I ran some numbers recently, I think I saw about 10% less sales for the first half of the year from last year to this year, which makes sense. I think our winter had a lot to do with this, and we are seeing a lot less inventory come out. Well, the Northeast and Midwest remain most supply-constrained regions in the country. We are posting the strongest inventory growth. You know, this is so true. It's a different world for us than in a lot of the other parts of the country. Florida, Texas, Arizona, Vegas, even parts of California, even upstate New York is seeing more inventory. We're not seeing as much here in Westchester and the boroughs here, Long Island, same thing. That proximity to New York City, even with everything all the changes going on with New York City, it's still it's New York City. It's the market there. So we're seeing that less inventory. We had that cold winter. I think, what's going on in Iran is getting people, let's see what happens. We don't know. And when things are uncertain, people tend to stay still rather than make some moves. Concern about home prices rising. This is a valid thing out there. We are seeing at a higher percentage that more people are concerned of home prices rising, especially as we're seeing inflation. In our area, you see it more that, we've probably seen price increases. I think on average, probably going to be 5 to 7.5% this year. A lot of it comes from the lack of inventory, and rates were low closer to the beginning of the year. As rates have increases and we've seen a little bit more supply with the spring, it's balanced it out, but this is something that we do have to watch. Jake Krimmel, again, senior economist, Realtor.com, said asking prices fell again at a record pace, down 2.5% year over year. That's the steepest annual drop in Realtor.com data since 2017 and the 8th straight month of declines. Once again, it's a tale of two different worlds. We see this here for us versus other parts of the country. It is a different world out there. Today's sellers are pricing to attract buyers. Without a doubt, you're seeing some stabilization. Nobody wants to see their house sit on the market for 3 months, 4 months. When we sit with homeowners, I try to give people options. Say, okay, if we price it at this is going to happen, this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. These are our options. What do you want to do? And every situation is different. There's not a one-size-fits-all, and that's where really having that communication, know what's going on, for me to understand your story. I talk about this. My wife is a psychotherapist, so I got that emotional kind of, going on background, living with her, and put 3 West Wing on my therapist's house. So, just understanding, and a lot of it isn't cut and dry. It's what's going on for you, what makes sense. As an investor, it's cut and dry, it's numbers. 99% of people, this is their home, this is when they live in, their children, put their head down at night. How do we make this scenario work for you? Danielle Hale, chief economist, Realtor.com. Sellers are reading market conditions and are pricing accordingly from the start rather than listing high and cutting later. The buyers are taking note and making bids. This is a welcome sign that we are in a functioning market. Absolutely. People are seeing this. They're trying not to price their home too high. The old adage of price high and negotiate, it's a different adage today. It's, hey, how do we get multiple people in there and get a bidding war? Because if we're wrong and we shoot too high, it's going to sit there. So we are looking, with interest rates right now, we're probably seeing interest rates probably at the, 6.5 to 6.75 mark. And I think we'll probably project this for the next 12 months of what's going on. I think we're probably going to see it. But we are seeing inflation trend up, and this is something that we do have to watch. If inflation continues up, the Feds will probably raise rate. There's a statistic out that a lot of people think the Feds will raise rates, which is going to hurt consumer confidence, which may shrink some of the demand. Not a lot, but some of the demand. And then the yield on the 10-year Treasury will go up. And, we are going to see the spread between the 10-year Treasury and mortgage rates kind of widen a little bit on the short term. So I think this is a real factor that we do have to watch and see what's going on. I think, 45% are expecting one hike, 31%, people polled in the financial world are expecting 2 hikes. So, this is something that we do have to watch, see what's going on. I think the quicker we can get out of Iran, get oil prices to settle down, bring gas prices, food prices, all that stuff settle down, I think that's going to do, much better for us. Here's an interesting fact. Investors are buying less properties nationally. So the big mega companies that are BlackRock, Zillow stopped buying a few years ago, Open-Door are starting to pull back a little bit. Depending on what it is, obviously they're looking for the good deal, but they're not so eager to jump in because we don't have in a lot of places around the country super price inflation. Some parts of the country we are seeing deflation, on pricing from where we were. So when they buy nationally, they're looking at that. In our area, we don't see a lot of that. Between New York's laws, the time it takes to close a deal, all the complexities of where we are, plus the prices in Westchester County, the institutional buyers aren't really buying. Investors are still buying here, but I can tell you from working with a lot of the investors that I do, they're buying, they will buy, but they're a little cautious. They know what's going on. They see what it is. They see what things cost these days. So not that the market has turned or anything like that, but I think there is a little bit of a cautious outlook out there for the market. And I think things will continue to rise on the short term, depending on what happens with the Fed, rates, and also what happens with inflation. Calendly put out, when Washington announces its intention to curb institutional investors' home buying, the market reacted. Although the ban has not yet taken effect, Calendly data shows that investment by mega investors who own 1,000 or more properties reacted almost instantly. When there's legislation that's going to hurt their business model, they are holding back, right? So if they're holding back, it does ripple down a little bit to other people and see what's going on. So right now, we still are in a strong market. We still have low inventory. We still have strong demand. I do think it's going to remain along those lines. But if you have any questions, want to go over what scenario works best for you, feel free to reach out. Happy to discuss.